What lights up a soccer stadium?
What?
A soccer match. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Brand Coverage. I'm Brandon Carney alongside Pat Gustafson. And for those of you tuning, I was going to say, for those of you tuning in live, Pat is not visibly here, but he just waved at you a little bit there. Pat still recovering from his recent surgery, so we want him to be nice and comfy, not have to sit upright at a camera, but he is still trooping through with his voice at the very least, so we do have him here for the pod.
For the Brainiacs or
the Brainiacs, the bench mob, whatever you want to call us, the paddy wagon, I don't know. But we are here.
Wagon shit.
I mean, I kind of like it. We are back for another episode of Brand Coverage. We've got a lot to go over as the offseason rolls along, as the draft starts to come into view a little bit. The NFL Combine begins this week, which, Pat, you know what that means. It is time to judge all of these players for doing things in their underwear that they will generally not actually have to do on a football field, and let that override all of the tape that they have put out in actual game scenarios up to this point.
We will get to see the incredible tradition of grown-ass men commenting on young men's bodies. For about a week straight. We're looking for, every year I feel like we get a good thick comment.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody thick. We'll see who brings that. But yeah, the stories that come out of this are typically fun in terms of the question. So, we'll see.
I do think the Combine, as the years go on, is taking less and less precedence, priority, having less impact over people's thoughts on players, because they are realizing just the general silliness of it.
I feel like it's for more of the cusp guys. I feel like, if you're going to be a first-round talent, I don't think the Combine is going to do a whole lot for you unless you really fucking tank, right? Or if you're Darius Hayward Bay,
Sure.
But I think for some of these guys who are kind of on the lower end of things that are getting invited to the Combine, in that case I can imagine. But generally, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see if any big things come out of here. I did see a post about noted Combine underperformers of the last few years, and it was guys that just tested horribly, and it was fantasy focused, so it was mostly running backs, but it was Kyron Williams was terrible, Bucky Irving was terrible last year. So just perfect example of not only does it not tell the whole story, it really doesn't tell much of the story at all, but nonetheless, it at least will get people a little more familiar with these prospects as the draft draws closer. So if you're not a big college football person or you don't know much about these guys, some of these names will at least come into view that your team might be drafting here in a little over a month and a half. I guess it's basically exactly 2 months out. So yes, Combine begins this week, but that's all we really have to say about that. We do have plenty to talk about this week, though. We touched on last week about Matthew Stafford and to the Giants trade rumors. He has been officially permitted to seek a trade, so we will talk about all those possibilities here in a minute. And then we will be getting to the 2025 free agent preview. We did this around this time last year, where we kind of just go through all the biggest free agents just to make you guys aware of who they are, where they might fit. And then after that, we are actually going to do a draft, which we also did last year. And it's less of a draft, more of just a back and forth placement of Pat and I's ideal fantasy football fits for some of these top free agents. So the way that'll work is just like last year, we will go back and forth. If let's say I put T. Higgins on some team, Pat cannot put T. Higgins on a different team. We each have one player back and forth. We have their fate in our hands, and we'll do that for 5 players each. So it'll be a fun one. We had a good time with it last year. I've listened back, and I think the first one I said was Saquon to the Texans. Sadly, that did not happen, but I think it worked out pretty well for Saquon.
And the Eagles. Fat guys going to the right place.
Yeah, and honestly, it worked out for the Texans as well. The Texans season didn't go as well as they would have hoped, but it was still a slam dunk, signing with Joe Mixon there. And yes, you did get a couple of the fat guys right. Well, you had Gus Edwards to the Chargers, which made a lot of sense, and you had Zeke back to the Cowboys, I believe it was.
I had him back with Tony Pollard, but I'm taking the credit on that one.
Pat, a little bit clairvoyant. But let's get into the news of the week.
Good evening. I'm Ron Burgundy, and this is what's happening in your world tonight.
So, Matthew Stafford, officially permitted to seek a trade. Now, this does not mean he is definitively going to be traded. The Rams have basically said, go ahead, Stafford, go look around, see what your market value is. And this is all reportedly stemming from the fact that, according to Peter Schrager, Stafford wants to be paid more than $50 million per year, which, when you look at the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL, that makes a lot of sense with the level that Stafford is still playing at. I personally was just a little bit surprised. Maybe it's because of the last couple years, like, retirement, rumors, rumblings, whatever you want to call them. I guess I was just a little bit surprised that not only, is he not retiring, he's also trying to be paid a lot more than he is. He's on about a $40 million a year contract right now, 4 years, $160 million. But I guess Stafford's decided, look, if I'm sticking around, I also want to be paid what I'm worth, and I think that's fair. Stafford is still pretty consensus, like, top 10 quarterback in the league. Obviously, it's a more of a shaky spot on that list because we know with the age could come the cliff at literally any time. He's age 37 right now. But Stafford is permitted to seek a trade because the Rams seemingly aren't super interested in paying him $50 million a year. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at with him right now.
Yeah, I was kind of on the same page as you, just surprised. I think that, like, potentially career-ending neck injury from 2 or 3 years ago really shifted the narrative on him. That, like, he was kind of just, like, in the twilight of his career. But if you take that completely out of the equation, yeah, this makes perfect sense. He's 37, which granted is getting up there, but I mean, he's younger than Aaron Rodgers. He's way younger than Tom Brady was when he retired. You'd think he could still potentially play 3 more years, at least until he's 40. And he's still playing at an incredibly high level at 37. And people would say, oh, why would the Rams want to do that? We'll kind of talk about it. There's a lot more teams that need a quarterback than satisfiable options. So I think if you're the Rams, you could get a decent haul from it. You're not going to get, what you gave the Lions for him, a handful of years ago. But I think you could still get a decent return for him. So I guess at this point, if I had to guess whether he stays or goes, I think he's gone.
I think he's gone too, because I think it's we maybe say this a lot, overuse it, but like where there's smoke, there's fire when it comes to a sort of unexpected thing like this. Like you look back at when I think of, the last time that we had like a really top end quarterback that we thought might be leaving his team. And it was Lamar Jackson a couple years ago when he was permitted to, test the market or whatever it was, however they worded it. And ultimately that did not happen. And it was like, that makes sense that he would stick around because obviously he's very young and also arguably the best quarterback in the league, at least from a statistical performance in the regular season. So that one was a little bit weird. But now the fact that a guy like Stafford is kind of finding himself in that situation at the age that he is, and the fact that this was just a completely unexpected development. Like with Lamar, at least it was, his contract was ending. Like Stafford's contract still has 2 more years on it. It's just that he wants to be paid, I guess, again, now that he's committed to playing a few more years, he wants to be paid what he's worth. And Pat, honestly, it's a very reasonable ask from him financially, $50 million a year, because when you look at the top paid quarterbacks, you're looking at it. Let's say he was paid 50 on the nose. That would still be less than Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, and Jalen Hurts. All those guys are being paid at least 51, anywhere from 51 to 60 million a year. So if Stafford's just saying, 50 mil, even if he's saying up to 55 mil, like as long as he's not asking to literally reset the quarterback market at 37, I think that's an understandable ask with how well he's playing. It's just a little surprising. I think we kind of have this idea of Matthew Stafford that he's like this, happy-go-lucky, happy to be here. He's older,
like he's
still
Matt
playing
Ryan
well, dude.
At the end of his career.
Yeah, we have this idea of him that he wouldn't want to maximize his value maybe because he's in such a comfortable situation with the Rams. But look, guys have different priorities, and I don't blame him. He's probably looking at himself.
Super Bowl.
He's got the Super Bowl. That's true. He's probably looking at himself, and I'm sure his agent's in his ear like, dude, you were playing as well as anybody. Like, you should get what you're worth. And I think they're just in the process of figuring that out right now. Now, the team's interested, according to Albert Breer. Basically, all the teams you would expect. Teams that need quarterbacks. The Giants, the Raiders, the Browns, and the Steelers, along with, quote, unnamed others. The most obvious ones that also would need a quarterback, in my eyes, are the Titans and the Jets, but they were not named by Breer, so maybe they're the others. Maybe there's some mystery teams in here that are, going to make a real shock move and move on from their guy. Maybe it's the Colts, so you never know. The Anthony Richardson situation gets weird. Chris Ballard today did say they would have an open quarterback competition, but we're not going to speculate on the quote others because we have 4 actual teams to suggest here or to go through here.
Where would you guess of these locations or the mystery teams? If you had to guess, where do you think he ends up?
It just the whole time it's been screaming Giants. It's been screaming.
That was going to be my answer as well.
It's been screaming Giants, and I made a video about this yesterday. But I feel like it's not a good move for the Giants. Maybe I'm interpreting the Giants, front office relationship incorrectly, but to me it seems like the fact that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll were widely believed to be on the hot seat after last season, and nobody really would have been surprised if they got fired, even though Schoen had a really nice draft. The Tyrone Tracy, Malik Neighbors. It was pretty widely considered that they were going to be on the hot seat, maybe let go. They held on to their jobs, and now it worries me that it is going to be okay, if we barely held on to our jobs, then clearly we need to make some progress here. And obviously the quarterback position, most important position that they have to address because they have no one there. It's Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito.
Literally no one's there.
Yeah, there's nobody.
No quarterbacks under contract right now.
So there's nobody there, and I just don't think. Maybe if the front office says that, hey, we're going to keep Schoen and Daboll around, maybe they are actually more patient than I'm giving them credit for, but the fact that it was believed they were on the hot seat tells me that they might be getting a little impatient, in which case they might be trying to make a desperation move here, which Matthew Stafford, who is playing this well, seems to have, like you said, Pat, a couple more years maybe of elite play under his belt or in his bag. I feel like it's a move that they would want to make for the sake of their jobs, even if it's not necessarily optimal for the Giants' actual Super Bowl timeline, because something like that isn't going to happen at best for 3-4 years. This isn't a Jaden Daniels situation.
If you think about it, I feel like if they were to bring in Stafford, like you said, you've got Neighbors, you've got Tracy, there are some really great players on that defense. You get a healthy Andrew Thomas, that line obviously needs significant improvement.
The line is the issue.
But there's a chance that team could be halfway decent. I'm not talking a playoff team or not, but say they win 7 or 8 games this year. I posture that's enough for Daboll and Schoen to keep their jobs. So it's not like they need to throw a humongous dart here and say, we need to do what the Commanders did and make the playoffs. I don't think that's the case. So it's if they can at least show ownership that hey, we're moving in the right direction here. And, obviously, hopefully we'll have Stafford for, another year or 2 after this, depending on what a new contract would look like. And again, if, like you said, Schoen had a great draft, they could also have another great draft. So I don't think it would be totally out of the realm of possibility for that plan to work.
No, but that's what I mean, though, is yes, I think 8 or even 9, wins would save Schoen and Daboll's jobs, but that's kind of my point, is I feel like the Giants' long-term best outlook would require an actual rebuild and actually bottoming out. Obviously, they have bottomed out a little bit here with having the number 3 pick in the draft, but I'm saying committing these assets and committing this money to Matthew Stafford at 37 years old versus just having less pressure to build, quote unquote, an immediate contender or an immediately improved roster. I feel like if you take more of a slow approach to it, you will have better results, while Daboll and Schoen, again, maybe I'm speculating too much, don't, I feel, have the leash to make that sort of calculated long-term rebuild, because they're probably getting looked at as they tried to do this rebuild and they committed to the wrong guy with Daniel Jones, so their leash is going to be short, and that's just it's a tough way to really rebuild a great roster with that. But look, I'm not disagreeing with you though completely, because Matthew Stafford is still really good. Let's say they get Stafford and draft a quarterback, because quarterbacks in this class are not really believed to be slam dunk, day one starters necessarily. You trade for Stafford, you draft a quarterback with number 3, you let him sit behind Stafford for a year or 2, and fill out the rest of the roster outside of that. That could be a potentially winning formula. I just think overall, looking at the Giants, they are certainly the most positioned team, or most motivated team at the very least, because of Daboll and Schoen's situation, to want a guy like Matthew Stafford. Not that I don't see the benefit for these other teams, I just think they are probably the most motivated. Raiders, Browns, and Steelers all make sense to certain degrees. I think Steelers probably more than the other two. I could let you.
Well, Steelers obviously are going to be way closer to contention than the Raiders and Browns. So obviously putting in a really good quarterback into what they have now, obviously you're looking at, they already make the playoffs. You're looking at possibly more of a contender in the AFC. as opposed to the Browns or Raiders. I mean, I feel like the fact we haven't heard the Titans' name probably means they're going to take Cam Ward. I mean, obviously we've got a lot of time to go, but I don't think that would be a real case for the Titans to trade draft capital, get Stafford, and then take a quarterback unless they've got the Falcons ownership at this point now to do something stupid like that. So, I think that's probably what happens there.
Yeah, I think the Jets is an interesting situation too, just from needing a quarterback perspective, because I guess they probably just don't want to go and try this, super old veteran thing again, even though Stafford is certainly decisively less of a head case than Aaron Rodgers is. But looking at the Jets and them not having a top, even 5 pick, I believe they're sitting at number 7. They are probably more positioned for if he were to make it there. At this point, this guy's draft, projection is all over the place. But like if a Jackson Dart were to go that high, they are probably looking at a quarterback a little bit later. I don't know. They're in an interesting spot, so I'll be curious to see if they get floated with Stafford at all. But Pat, we are, a real life podcast, but also a fantasy podcast. So let's kind of pick these fits for both situations. What is the best fit for Matthew Stafford in real life, and what is the best fit for him in fantasy? So we got our prediction out of the way. We think it's the Giants just based on all the signals we've been given, right? But the best fit for him in real life, where will Matthew Stafford thrive the most and create the best marriage of team and quarterback out of sort of these realistic landing spots?
Oh, I think it's Pittsburgh, just because, like we just kind of mentioned, that they're the closest team. I don't even say they're technically, they're a playoff team. So of course they're close to contending. Obviously, you kind of wonder how a quarterback like that would fit into the Mike Tomlin, Arthur Smith mindset here. But at this point, if he wants to win, if Stafford wants to end his career winning, or at least something close to winning, that's the place to go.
Yeah, I would agree. You look at the Browns, they're just... Even when they build a good thing, they bail on it. We'll talk about the Baker Mayfield years, and they are just a dumpster fire. Obviously, they did make the playoffs the season before this most recent one with Joe Flacco, and just weird vibes on that season in total. The Raiders probably got a little bit longer of a way to go, and then the Giants.
Shocked.
I do see the vision for it's certainly an improved season for them if they were to get Stafford. But yeah, I think the Steelers, with that defense, and who knows, maybe they could get Cooper Kupp to join him in Pittsburgh. I think that is the best just position team, because they were just a playoff team. That is pretty. I mean, you do got to wonder if they're literally a package deal, right? If they've both been put on the block, not a make or break package deal, but if we more likely than not see them go somewhere together.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's wild.
Best fit for fantasy football. Now, I'm not really going to say for Matthew Stafford's fantasy value, because we know what he is in fantasy at this point. Even on a team like the Rams, with the weapons that he has and the coaching that he has, we're past the Matthew Stafford archetype of him being an actually good fantasy quarterback on a consistent basis. He'll have stretches, sure, but when you're a pocket passer, limited appeal as far as outside of 2 quarterback leagues. But as far as what team he could elevate maybe the most guys on and create the best fantasy situation for these guys out of these realistic options, I feel like that's probably the Giants. I look at the Steelers, where it would be, he's going to elevate George Pickens, sure, but honestly, George Pickens was pretty good with Russell Wilson. George Pickens just needs a couple deep balls. I don't know how much more Matthew Stafford is going to do for Pickens than has already been done for him. I don't think Pickens really has much more room to improve necessarily, or I guess I'm just not predicting he's going to improve much. I think he's a very vertical receiver, and he's just kind of going to stay that way. But the Giants, Pat, Malik Neighbors led the league in targets per game last year. If he could lead the league in targets per game, and 80% of those targets weren't hot dog shit from Drew Lock or Daniel Jones, you're looking at, I think, the wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. I don't see that kind of upside for anybody else as far as these landing spots go. I mean, I think the Raiders is an interesting one, at least as far as Brock Bowers goes. The Browns, a little boring. I don't really care about Jerry Jeudy or Cedric Tillman stonks. And then the Titans and the Jets. The Jets would be an interesting one, I guess, just because of Garrett Wilson, and we're kind of waiting for him to get unlocked. But I think the best fit for him in fantasy would be the Giants. Would you agree there? Oh, did I lose Pat? Did we lose?
I
Pat?
muted by accident. Do you hear me now?
Okay, there you are.
Okay.
Hello, welcome
I
back.
put it too close to. Yeah, I forgot that this mic, if you tap the top of it, it mutes. Well, I was calling us a boring ass podcast anyway because we're just agreeing here. But yeah, it's it's the Giants. We saw, like, you pretty much hit the nail on the head there. If Stafford can just elevate the floor of some of these targets, like, I mean, Malik Neighbors is really the guy that we care about here. That would be incredible. Honestly, I obviously, some bias here, but I think the Raiders would be a good spot because you look at what Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers could do under Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. Stafford would just raise the floor of those guys, which is crazy because those are floor guys to begin with.
Yeah.
But to even raise, well, obviously Bowers is both, but to raise the floor even higher on those guys. But yeah, the Steelers, they're gonna go through the run no matter what. So I don't really see for fantasy how much that offense would burst with him. So yeah, Giants boring.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I'd be very excited about the Neighbors situation. Again, already looking ahead at our fantasy draft because Pat and I vaguely know our draft spots. Like, if Matthew Stafford were to go to the Giants and I'm picking at likely 6th overall in our league, like, I would not hesitate to take Malik Neighbors there if he was playing with Matthew Stafford. I would not. That would be an easy one for me. So we will keep an eye on where Matthew Stafford ends up. If he stays in LA, if he does in fact get traded, it does seem like we are trending toward a trade at this point. Again, where there's smoke, there's fire, and I'm starting to smell a little bit of smoke here. Some more news coming out of the past few days is the Tush Push ban proposal. We're doing this again. Apparently, it was initially an anonymous team submitted a proposal to ban the Tush Push, and then it became less anonymous when we found out it was the Green Bay Packers, which is funny because I believe the Packers are the second most successful team at running the Tush Push. They just do it with Tucker Kraft at quarterback when they do it. But I just want to get my opinion out there because it is unchanged. I think it is incredibly silly that the Tush Push is possibly getting banned. I just don't understand.
It's football. Unless there's plays.
I think you're a little far from the mic there, Pat.
Oh, I'm far from the mic. How about now?
There you go. That's better.
All right, I completely moved. I've completely moved. I'm now horizontal in bed.
That's fine.
But you look at certain things like a hip drop tackle. That is like blatantly dangerous. Like, you could say that yes, there are more injuries on the Tush Push, but until we have that real data where it's like significantly happening. I saw a ridiculous thing on Twitter that Chris Jones like faked a neck injury to start the Super Bowl so the Tush Push would look bad. It's like, okay, Eagles fans, you won the Super Bowl. Relax. Like,
Jesus Christ.
But yeah, it's a football play. Is that fun to watch? No. But at the end of the day, why punish teams for coming up with an innovative plan there? As much as you hate it as a Saquon Barkley owner from time to time, it works. And I saw people saying that the Packers wanted this and it was the play where like Love had a seizure on the snap and just like fell directly into the lineman's ass for some reason.
I just don't see, and I've said this over and over, and I've yet to really be refuted on it with anything adequate. Like, I don't see the need to ban a play that only one team is good at. Like, I understand it's an ugly play, and it would be a problem if every team was able to run this play flawlessly, especially if they were able to be like the Eagles and gain, 4 yards on it every time, because then you could literally just do that all the way down the field if you wanted, and the game is ruined. Yeah, you ban it because of just competition issues and entertainment issues. But this is one team that knows how to do this. It clearly can't be that OP if only one team has managed it. So I don't understand why we're punishing the Eagles for being the only team that knows how to fully execute this play. We watched the Bills fail it about 100 times against the Chiefs, and the Eagles are better at it because they have the best offensive line in football, or one of the best offensive lines in football, and that should be an advantage, having the best offensive line in football. So I don't get it. I won't be upset if it goes because it just doesn't affect me that much. But I feel like the people that are so heavy against the Tush Push and in favor of the ban are just fans of teams that have been personally victimized by it. It's just fans of other NFC contenders that are like, that's not fair. And I'm like, everything else for the Eagles works a lot better because their offensive line is good too. Like, it's not just this one play. Your team should just maybe get a better O-line. Like, I don't really know what to tell you. If it's only one team running it well, then I don't see any reason it should be banned, and that's just kind of where I'm at.
Genuinely not even memeing here, just like skill issue.
Literal skill
figure
issue.
it out. Figure it out.
Literal skill issue. Figure it out. Yeah, I'm sorry the Eagles are this good at this one thing. Fuck off. Travis Kelce, Pat, expected to return per general manager Brett Veach. We have not heard official word from Kelce or anything, but all these coaches and general managers are speaking at the Combine this week, and one of the things that Brett Veach said was that they left it in a place, the conversation with Kelce, that is, where he's expected to return. He sounds excited and fired up. He's got, at least another year in him, and that this Super Bowl loss kind of motivated him. It was less certain that he would return in the days immediately following the Super Bowl, but I feel like that's to be expected. He was, everybody's going to be super down right after you lose the Super Bowl, but sounds like Kelce's going to be coming back. As far as the ramifications of that, well, it means that I think we can kind of just look at the Chiefs' offense last year for now and pretty much project it forward. Kelce, I don't think is going to be a very interesting fantasy pick or a very productive player as far as stats are concerned.
Which is just insane. Could you imagine saying that 2 years ago when he was going as a first-round pick? I mean, I feel like he'll still probably be a tight end. Well, he'll be a tight end one, right? But
I don't want to say he's
not going to be Travis Kelce anymore. Like he has fallen out of, especially with some of these young tight ends, as good as they are. He's kind of fallen out of that, possibly in the top 5. Again, I'm talking out of my ass. I have not ranked this out, but
I don't think I'll be having him ranked in my top 5 because you have to look at it. Even the numbers that he did manage to salvage this past year and get up to tight end 1 territory, or I think he finished with 850 yards, and he might have, I don't remember how many touchdowns he had. I know he was around 850 yards though, but you have to look at when Rashee Rice was healthy, right? Because Rashee Rice was playing the Travis Kelce role, and that was a large part of why Kelce was so absent up until, Mahomes destroyed Rashee Rice's ACL, accidentally, of course. But you have to look at the start of next year and assume that Rashee Rice is going to be back pretty early in the year, if not at the very start. I don't remember the exact timetable there. And you just assume Kelce will fall back to that unproductivity. And not only that, you have Xavier Worthy, who really came on at the end of the year. I just think Kelce's at a point where he's absolutely going to take a back seat in terms of production. We have evidence of it happening. Now he's another year older, and the Chiefs' surrounding weapons are another year better. So I am holistically uninterested in Travis Kelce as far as fantasy football is concerned, and I think if nothing else, it at least allows him to keep occupying a spot there, which means, let me try to word this the best way I can. He's still going to be in that offense, but we're not expecting much, which means we can more reliably expect production from Rice and Worthy. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm going to trust them more.
Because you think about it, I'd rather have Sam Laporta than Travis Kelce. I'd rather have Mark Andrews than Travis Kelce. Obviously, the top guys like Bowers, McBride, you're taking them over him. But even towards the middle of the pack here, it's there are more enticing options because in spite of that offense being the Chiefs, it isn't always a fantasy gold mine.
Right.
Especially the last few years.
Yeah, I think we're all waiting for the Chiefs to just get back to that, gunslinging mentality where they're one of the best offenses.
It's clearly working that they don't have to do that.
Is it, though, now, after this year? Yes, they made the Super Bowl. I get it. I don't want to diminish that too much.
I think that's good. I'd personally be fine with that, yes.
To me, though, you understand, if you're the Chiefs, you understand that the Eagles are still out there, and you understand that if you were to have a rematch with them and have the game script go the same way it did, the Chiefs are not built to play from behind right now. And I think that's the issue. They may want some more offensive firepower to be able to say, hey, we can make this kind of comeback, because in that Super Bowl, nobody really expected the Eagles, obviously, to step on the Chiefs' neck the way they did. But after they did that, other than the fact that we had PTSD from the Patriots-Falcons 28-3 Super Bowl, the Chiefs realistically were not built to come back from that. They have not been an explosive enough offense, score on you quickly, end drives fast sort of offense, and that worked for them throughout the year because their defense played well and they were able to keep these games low scoring, and as we know, win some of these games in silly ways by one possession and crazy plays or whatever it was. They I can't imagine that they're just going to be okay with being like, yeah, we're just going to be another plotting offense if they can help it. So I'll be curious to see what kind of moves they make, and see if they maybe try to get to a little bit more higher scoring version of themselves so that they're not just utterly fucked if they find themselves in a huge deficit again in a game that matters. Let's see. More tight end news. We briefly had a rumbling that Rob Gronkowski was interested in making an NFL return. From a reporter with denversports.com, I believe it was, they were reporting that Gronk was interested in returning with the Denver Broncos because he worked with Sean Payton at Fox and really liked Bo Nix as a quarterback. I immediately called bullshit on this on Twitter for a few reasons. A, Gronk is 35 years old. B, he has an extensive injury history.
That's pretty much why he retired this early. He could have probably played a little longer.
It's why he retired. And C, the last time I saw this man on TV, he was built like Dan Orlovsky. Like
definitely not Gronk at least.
And like I understand football players can gain weight quickly, but like no, I just didn't. If he had any inklings in the back of his mind that he was going to make a comeback, I don't think he lets himself get into that kind of shape. But we did have a refuting report from, an actual reporter, Ian Rappaport, today, and he basically just said, utter nonsense, Gronk's not returning, which, duh, thank you. Obviously.
He would be the second player to openly have CTE after Antonio Brown on the field, so at least that would be, representation matters, right?
That is true. So yes, Gronk not returning because fucking obvious. The Bengals, Pat, plan to make Jamar Chase the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. Now, we assumed...
You fucking better.
Yeah, we assumed the Bengals were not going to let Jamar Chase go anywhere. T. Higgins may be a different story, although they're also trying to bring him back. But Jamar Chase, at the very least, was an obvious, like, you can't let this guy go. You'd be the biggest idiots in the world. Being the highest paid non-quarterback in the league would mean he is paid over $35 million a year because that is what Justin Jefferson currently makes as the current highest paid non-quarterback. So you're looking at least $36 million a year for Chase. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised, Pat, if it reaches closer to 40 because of just how much the cap went up this offseason. It was a really big jump by like 20 mil.
And it's especially if they do end up moving on from T. Higgins, which, God, that's going to be the taboo word of the taboo name of the offseason, like Ayuk was last year.
I hope it gets done quicker than Ayuk, either an extension or something.
I feel like it will, but yeah, Chase was just so, we were kind of went into last year when there were these contracts things talking up where it's like, Jamar Chase is one of the top receivers in the league. Take one of out because he was head and shoulders above everyone else. Not only with the production, he's playing with Joe Burrow in an offense that loves to throw the ball like that. Everything makes sense, or they would have been absolutely foolish to let him go over almost any amount of money here.
Yeah. No, it's the type of player you just don't let go under any circumstances unless...
Kind of like Mookie Betts. Oh.
I was about to say, unless, of course, you want to trade him to the Lakers for Anthony Davis.
No, for the love of God.
And a second-round pick. But yes, Bengals, assuming...
Well, they're playing tonight, aren't they? Yeah, they are.
Are they? Luka had his first actually good game, and of course it was against the Nuggets, and he bodied us. But
the battle of the fat, yeah.
I know, the fat Europeans.
It's on TNT, 10 o'clock. Cool. I'll be watching.
The Battle of the Fat Europeans. Sounds like a great movie. More receiver news. An extension that actually got done today was Khalil Shakir landing an extension with the Bills for 4 years, $60 million. Not a lot to say other than
which
deserved.
Is funny. Someone asked about him last week, and we were kind of just like, he's
That's
just
true, they did.
He's just a really steady guy in that offense. He's never going to be like the guy, but he plays his role really well, and he's going to continue to be a big part of that offense. Obviously, now we know that for sure, but rightfully so.
Yeah, I think $15 million a year is probably a good price for him.
Yeah, how much did Christian Kirk make? Yeah,
more than that. Let's see. Christian Kirk is at... Christian Kirk's at $18 million a year, which the fact that, Shakir is at 15 with the cap about to go up, like that's even better.
I think I'd pay Khalil Shakir more right now.
Yeah, I would as well. I'm looking at some of the receivers paid. Let's start at $15 million and go with the guys that are paid at least 15 or more. Tyler Lockett, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, I guess Judy's maybe more well-rounded overall. But
see how much he deserved that next year. Yeah,
exactly. Christian Kirk, no. Deontay Johnson, no. And I don't want to discredit Kirk too much. Kirk's very good when healthy, but he's
it's just he's
Shakir for cheaper is just, it sounds a lot nicer.
Christian Kirk in Buffalo would feed families. Like, let's be honest, it's
that's
where he is right now.
Very true. So I think it's just a very appropriate payment for Shakir. We're not often in a place where we're analyzing contracts that aren't just new market resetting contracts. It feels like that's every deal we've talked about for the last few years, and it's about to be the case with Jamar Chase again. All right. Before we get into our free agent preview, just a real quick, I've implemented a weekly Yukon update just to because I got to get this off my I got to get this off my chest somewhere on a weekly basis. So yes, our weekly Yukon update, and Pat, I like where you're going with that. Man, it's not fucking pretty, man. I feel like the optimism in me wanes every show that we do. Like, the first time we touched on Yukon after the offseason hit, I was like, it's not looking great. We're not as good. We're probably not winning at all. But, like, the ceiling's still really high. Now I'm like, how high is the ceiling? I don't know.
Here's the thing. I think my attitude is very different, at least from the lunatics I see on Twitter. This team just won the national championship twice in a row.
Yeah.
Think about how many major conference programs, like St. John's, for example, who hasn't done absolute shit in the last 100 years. We have been so spoiled that 100%. A team being an 8 seed, still being decent, they're going to make the tournament, barring a complete disaster here. They're still going to make the tournament. Like, I just don't, it's not that I don't care about the team, it's just like, I'm just not that bothered by this. Like, I think we're realizing more and more just how special that team was last year. Obviously, having 2 top 10 picks as underclassmen, as well as, a 5-year player in Tristan Newton, who was obviously the glue that held that offense together. That's what I always say to my dad. The biggest thing is they don't have a Tristan Newton. They don't have a guy who you want the ball in his hands in a big spot.
Yeah, I don't want the ball in anyone's hands.
Well, that's what I mean, exactly. Either where he can make the shot himself, he can create for others, he can at least get the offense set up. Like, they don't have that, and like, it is what it is. Like, you can't expect a team to be as good as they were the last 2 years. Like, yes, it's been disappointing, but they've got 3 top 50 recruits coming in next year.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot more to look to this team. Like, but at the same time, people love shitting on Yukon. They're like, oh, stop living in the past. Last I checked, Yukon is currently the defending championship.
If you're the reigning
I'm not living in the
champion,
past. I'm living right until there is another champion crowned. That team is the champion. So we're not living in the past. We're living in right fucking now.
No, I get
and even if it was 2 years from now, that's still living in the present. Like, we're not talking fucking Yankee fans here, who haven't won shit in almost 20 years now at this point. Like, they're literally the current reigning champions. Like, stop it.
No, I'm not concerned at all about, like, the long-term future seasons. But I will push back a little on just the sense that, like, this season is still a lot worse than I think even the worst case that we expected of a team coming off 2 national championships. Because, you say, yeah, we're going to make the tourney. Like, we should not be at a point where we are questioning if that's a possibility. And it's not a lock. Close. Like, it's not a lock, right? Like,
their chances are still like 94% according to BPI. Like,
I understand, but like, there is the fact that it's 94% is wild. We have a game tomorrow against Georgetown. If we lose that game, we are squarely on the bubble at that point. So like that's the thing. It hinges now on each game. It's not like we have cemented a clear resume of making the tournament. I just think, yes, maybe we should have expected a come down, from the back-to-back titles, obviously. But to me, there's a difference between a come down and being, if we do make the tournament, it seems like we will, being an 8 or 9 seed in the tournament. Like, I would have been like, okay, if we enter the tourney as a 6 or 7, that's disappointing. But like that, you could live with that.
I figured they'd be ranked all year. Like, I feel like they would have been a top 25 team all year. So yeah, obviously wasn't expecting another championship, but I was expecting a little more than this, but at the same time, it's like
you fall out the ranking, and then falling out of the ranking, you lose to a 6-win Seton Hall team on the road.
That was just disgusting.
And then you just get outclassed by St. John's. Pat, this is what I mean about like the bubble too. If we lost that game against Villanova, where we were trailing by double digits with only a few minutes left in the game, we are on the bubble right now.
Look a lot scarier.
Yeah, we held on. So it's just a bummer. I think, like, again, I'm gonna ride this train with whatever this team wants to give me. But as far as like expectations, I've seen too much of this team now to expect all these issues to be magically fixed and look, suddenly Yukon somehow in the Final Four again because they're Yukon. Now, if any team has done that in the past, it's Yukon. But just this version of this team, I just don't see it. I would love more than anything to be wrong. There's just so many holes on this roster.
But have no fear. St. John's will be avenged when they are a 3 seed and lose to 14 seed Central Connecticut in the first round. Yukon will be avenged by their big brothers, who I will call them now.
I don't know, man. St. John's has really impressed me, not just against Yukon, but just
they're really good. I fucking hate Rick Pitino.
They're so good. I'm trying to put together in my head like obviously, regions aren't created yet, but like an ideal Final Four if I could, and I'm like, I might want to put St. John's in there if the seeding works out and they don't have to play a team that I like more. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, right, exactly. No, in my head, I'm like, early Final Four. I would love if I could somehow create like Duke, Auburn, St. John's, Michigan. Like, that would be like a lit Final Four for me. I love me some Michigan. And St. John's being part of that conversation is just not something I expected, but it is what it is. All right.
Or enjoy,
We will, at all. We will move on from the little college basketball rant, and we'll keep up with our weekly Yukon updates. But we've got some free agents to talk about. The 2025 pre-agent preview. We've got organized by positions here. Pat put together a nice little list, and then after that, we will get to our draft of best fantasy fits for particular free agents.
I'll tell you, it's not a nice little list because in terms of fantasy, at least, this is dookie, man. Like, honestly, the O-line and defense is very deep. It's a deep, but we're a fantasy first podcast. Like, I don't know how to assess offensive line.
No, I know. All you could really look at is PFF grade, because you and I are not about to be grinding film and checking out like their hand technique and how their feet are and all the lateral quickness, whatever the fuck. It's for guys that not only are already in the league, not even considering like draft guys who we actually are unsure about those things about them.
I know this guy's name. He's probably good. There's my analysis.
Exactly. Guys whose names we've heard before. Okay. Yeah, I think you make a good point there just really quickly. Like, last year, fantasy-wise, was like the year of the free agent. We got to let that go as far as this upcoming year is concerned. I think this upcoming fantasy theme might be like the year of the rookie running back, because this draft class is really strong. And if those guys end up in good spots, we may really have a lot of rookie backs, on top of just not just Ashton Genty, but we may have a lot of rookie backs that end up being on that RB1 or 2 borderline. Okay, but these are the free agents for this year. Quarterback. We start with Sam Darnold. We obviously know he's kind of the biggest fish in the sea right now. Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Justin Fields, Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, and then Pat's got silly little guys. A couple of them more quarterbacks, but they probably won't find themselves anywhere near a starting job next year.
But they've started in the last year or two.
Started recently. Jacoby Brissett, Drew Lock, Daniel Jones, Mac Jones, Mason Rudolph. Guys who will enter the season as backups, and who knows, you may see them as starters at some point. But starting with Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Justin Fields, I think those are kind of a big four of like guys we cautiously expect all four of them to start. I only say cautiously because Fields might be the question mark there. But those four I would expect to see starting somewhere and possibly making some level of impact or fantasy impact. And then you get to Jameis Winston, and it's like, I'd like to see him somewhere. We'll talk about that in the fantasy fits draft. And then the guys after that is just kind of gross. But yeah, the quarterback class, this is kind of how it goes most years, right? Like, quarterback free agent classes generally aren't good, because if a guy is any good, if a guy's any good, he is getting held on to like Fort Knox.
Let's be honest, the only reason Sam Darnold was because they kind of fell into him and already had J.J. McCarthy lined up for the future.
Yeah.
Like, that's if it weren't for McCarthy, Darnold would have been locked up weeks ago.
Yeah. Where do we stand with Sam Darnold, Pat? Where do you think he ultimately ends up? Do you think he's going back to Minnesota, or do you think he finds himself just elsewhere?
See, that's the thing. It's like after 2 bad games, everyone kind of just declared Darnold toast in Minnesota, when before that it was kind of the opposite, where everyone was like, McCarthy's going to be the one to move on. Oh, I also guess I didn't put Kirk Cousins on here. Oh no, I think he's going to be the backup, right?
He's under contract. They said they're holding on, yeah.
So that's right. I don't know why that just popped in my head, because I kind of thought of the Michael Penix situation. But so, like, we don't know 100% for sure that this is the way Minnesota's going to go. I think this is just the way everyone thinks they will, and they're probably right. But it's so tough, because a lot of these teams are like in positions where they probably don't want to invest that much in a quarterback right now. Like, I think more of a Russ or Rodgers is the way, like, a team like the Raiders, a team like the Browns, a team like the Steelers is probably going to want to go. Or either that or get a guy in the draft, which is, again, probably where the Titans will go, possibly where the Browns will go. So Sam Darnold kind of just feels like the red herring of this quarterback class because of his performance and his age. It's like he commands more than these guys, and it's like, which team is going to give him that? And it's like, if the Titans didn't have the first pick, this just screams Titans.
Yeah.
So I feel like it screams Raiders, which just, I don't think I like that, but
yeah, I think he ends up somewhere other than Minnesota, and I hope that's not.
I still do too.
I hope that's not just me trying to manifest, changes, because so many times in the offseason I feel like we look at free agents or, trade targets, and we're like, oh, he could go here, he could go there, and more often than not, guys just end up staying where the fuck they're at, especially when it was a situation they succeeded in the year prior. But I feel like Darnold ends up elsewhere because of the McCarthy pick. I think they believe in McCarthy. I think O'Connell has such a good track record of making it work with whoever, and it's like, even if McCarthy, unless McCarthy is just a complete disaster of a draft pick, I think he's going to be able to get plenty out of him to the point where it's worth, going with the guy on the rookie contract. We talk all the time about how valuable that is in the NFL. And I just think McCarthy is the more optimal move there. Whether that means Darnold ends up with, the Raiders, or a reunion with the Jets now that they're under new management, or possibly the Rams with a little shimmy shake-up if they were to get rid of Stafford.
Actually, I like that a lot.
I do too.
I do too. Like, you'd think, again, because you talk about O'Connell and you talk about when he was the backup in San Francisco, at least, who's the last guy in that holy trinity of can make anything work, and it's Sean McVay. So right. Actually, I think that's the fit if Matthew Stafford. God, that might pop up in the draft soon, but
very true. Looking at these other guys, Russell Wilson, he's a stopgap quarterback regardless of where he goes. Again, we have this list of kind of the Raiders, Titans, whoever you want to talk about, and so we'll see where he ends up as far as that goes. Aaron Rodgers, there's been some speculation about him being interested in the Rams if that situation were to open up if Matthew Stafford leaves. I don't really get that.
They want that bullshit, though.
I feel
like Sean McVay's not that guy.
No, I don't think a well-oiled machine. And look, I'm not suggesting that Rodgers is like a complete cancer to a locker room,
no.
But like when you have something set up like the Rams do, where it's just such a well-oiled machine year in and year out, I don't know that adding that kind of drama is necessary. I think they would sooner bite the bullet on a Stafford extension rather than go to Rodgers, who presumably will be cheaper than Stafford at this point just because of performance, I guess. But it doesn't strike me as a great fit for Rodgers. I feel like Rodgers is maybe more of a Titan or something to that effect if they decide not to draft a quarterback, or even if they do decide to draft a quarterback.
I even feel like he would fit better with the Raiders, because I feel like you got Pete Carroll there who might be able to at least reel him in a little bit. I don't know if they're going to necessarily make him stop going on McAfee or anything, but you've got a really respected figure in Pete Carroll, and even Chip Kelly leading the offense under there. So maybe they'd be able to, obviously, in terms, because we bring it up every week, in terms of production, he wasn't bad at all last year. It was just the fact that he wasn't Aaron Rodgers and that he was acting like such a clown off the field that that was easy to overlook. Like a team like the Raiders, obviously he's not going to go to fucking Cleveland, but for a team like Cleveland, Aaron Rodgers would be a more than good fit.
Right. As far as Justin Fields goes, I really don't care where he ends up. I just want him to start somewhere. I think he's too fun of a player to continue sitting on the bench all the time. I know that he is a flawed quarterback, obviously, but there are teams that roll out a lot worse than him year in and year out. So I hope he gets a starting gig somewhere.
And we talked about this either last week or the week before. Like, he's kind of the last hope where it's like, if you don't want to draft a quarterback, but you want a guy in this class that could potentially be a long-term guy, I feel like there is at least still a shred of hope for Justin Fields that he can be, if developed correctly, he could be someone down the line. But like I said, I think that's pretty much turned into a shred. Like, this is going to be his last chance to become anything more than a career backup.
Yeah, and then Jameis Winston, I just think he would be fun if he went somewhere that he could sling it to, a fantasy relevant player. I would love it. Anywhere he goes, it's just a fantasy boon, even though it's like a real life kind of I guess. So whether that's like the Raiders for Brock Bowers,
it's going to be an no matter what,
or the Giants for Malik Neighbors, like I would love to see him go somewhere that he can just chuck it. But then it's that contradiction of, yeah, he's going to be awesome for that guy in fantasy, but that's only for as long as he's actually the starter, because we also know Jameis Winston's real life play tends to play him out of the starting gig at some point.
A bit to be desired, as much as we love the guy.
Yeah, I mean, he got benched for DTR at a certain point this year, and it's like that you could chalk that up to the Browns being the Browns, or you could chalk that up to Jameis was actually
it was that out of hand for them to do that.
Well, my only issue is that DTR is so fucking bad. Like, he's not an NFL quarterback, as much as I hate to say it, because I really he had like that preseason stint 2 years ago.
He was the preseason darling.
Where I was like, oh, this guy's fucking awesome. And then I got to remind myself he's playing against like literal Costco cashiers.
Boom!
But it's fuck. But that's the quarterback breakdown. Running back, you want to talk about a bunch of names that it's like, I guess they're good, but like,
I mean, there will be guys that will make an impact in real life and fantasy on this list.
Yeah, so we've got Aaron Jones.
For better or for worse.
Right. We've got Aaron Jones, Najee Harris, J.K. Dobbins, Rico Dowdle, Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, Javonte Williams, Raheem Mostert, and then restricted free agents Jordan Mason and Jalen Warren. This is not obviously an exhaustive list of running backs, but just kind of the list of the most relevant ones. Yeah, just a lot of guys that like, we're not going to be sitting here waiting with bated breath like we were with Saquon and Derrick Henry to see where these guys go, to see how eager we're going to be to draft them in fantasy. It's kind of guys, even if they go to an ideal spot, you're not looking at anything more than an RB2 for any of them in fantasy. And as far as real life production goes, it's like, I don't know, Aaron Jones, his best fit is probably just to chill in Minnesota. They don't really have any other backs anyway.
Spoilers. No, I agree.
I would think they're not really going to be keen on moving on from him and handing the keys to Ty Chandler or Cam Akers. Again, talking about all this pre-draft is also a little difficult too, because like, let's say the Vikings, draft the RB2 in the class, whoever that ends up being. There's a lot of debate over it right now, whether it's Travion Henderson or Caleb Johnson or Omarion Hampton. But if they draft one of those guys, then it's like maybe Aaron Jones isn't needed. But for right now, looking at depth charts, it's like it would be a surprise if he left. Najee Harris has just been the definition of serviceable the last couple years. Like, 1,000-yard rusher every year, which sounds awesome on paper until you remember there's 17 games in the season now, and he's literally just barely crossing that threshold every year just off of volume alone. He's a fine back if he gets a heavy workload somewhere. Yeah,
he hasn't really missed any time. I don't believe he's had any kind of major injuries where he's missed any time. So I mean that pays.
Sure, absolutely. Like if he gets a heavy workload somewhere, it'll be interesting. But if he goes somewhere that he's splitting time like he was with Jalen Warren, it's another kind of just wet fart. J.K. Dobbins, another guy who I feel like is kind of in his ideal spot right now, because I don't know what teams are really going to commit much more of a workload to him. I mean, look, he had a certain level of work this year and blew expectations out of the water. He still spent 4 weeks on IR. So he's a guy that, it's hard to get excited about like projecting him toward a workhorse role. Rico Dowdle's a guy that I could see maybe having a backfield to himself if it's in Dallas or otherwise. I don't know. But he's maybe, I don't want to say the highest ceiling player, because I think that still belongs to like Aaron Jones and Najee Harris.
I think it's
But he had a really nice year this year. So if he does leave Dallas, he's kind of one of the names I'd be looking at.
He just scares me as a guy that will go to a situation where like we want the guy there right now to be the number one. And he's just gonna muddy it right
Make life
up.
hell.
Like Tony, he's gonna be Tony Pollard essentially last offseason, potentially.
Right, and then guys
I'm just gonna say it straight up: if the Bengals sign another running back, we're rioting.
I think they're gonna sign another running back.
That's why I'm scared too. That's why. That's why if I wasn't worried about it, I wouldn't have said it.
Again, maybe spoilers for our free agent draft. I might have a running back to the Bengals.
No.
That's gonna be my first pick, just to fuck you over.
Give him
Chase
T.
Brown,
Higgins, they'll be
fanboy. Fuck. And then guys with workloads that are completely like up in the air. Like the first four guys we named, we know are going to get pretty significant touches somewhere next year. These guys are like, who knows? Kareem Hunt was very good this past year in his role, but was a free agent up until halfway through the year. And then even when he signed on with the Chiefs, like we remember him as being like pretty damn good for that offense, but he was also just like, Kareem Hunt was like if you need 4 yards, I'll get you 4 yards, and if you need 5 yards, I'll get you 4 yards. Like he was just not breaking any big ones.
He's not
all.
explosive.
No,
he seems destined to be back in Kansas. If he decides to continue playing,
right.
He seems destined to be the backup in Kansas City. Which with a healthy Pacheco, we won't see Hunt, eating in nearly as much as he did down the stretch here. Once we have a full off season of a healthy Pacheco. Knock on wood.
Yeah. We got Nick Chubb, who just absolutely abysmal efficiency. All signs are pointing toward the Browns moving on from him. Obviously, post-injury, at his age, it's a tough thing to like fully bounce back from. Again, I act like he's a senior
finally
citizen,
Jerome Ford season.
But destroying his leg at age 28 did not bode well for his attempted return at 29. But we'll see where he ends up this year. It does not seem like it's going to be Cleveland. And yeah, just Jerome Ford. They just head into the next season with him as the only back there. Imagine.
I love how we talk about this man like he's about to be put in a nursing home when he's just our age, pretty much.
I mean, he's our age, but I don't know about you, Pat. I didn't tear every ligament in my knee, so like.
Brother, I've had 2 back surgeries in the last 14 months. I'm waiting for him at the nursing home.
Fair enough. Javonte Williams, again, no one really knows what to expect from him. Has not reached what we thought his potential might be.
He seems like more of a compliment, like a 1B type of guy. I don't think he'll ever be what we wanted before the injuries.
Might even be generous to put the 1 next to his name. And then Raheem Mostert, a name we know at this point. I really wouldn't be surprised if he got virtually no work next year because he didn't get any with the Dolphins, and they could have used somebody if they believed he was up for it.
I wouldn't be surprised if he's back in Miami, though. Or San Francisco in just kind of like a reserve role.
They cut him from Miami. I don't expect them to bring him back if they cut him. He wasn't just like his contract was up. They were like,
oh, yeah. Well, wasn't kind of expensive, though?
No. But Jordan Mason and Jalen Warren, restricted free agents to round this out.
Anywhere.
We don't even know if they're going to be available, but it does not seem like they are.
They never do. Restricted free agency is so stupid.
Yeah, it is. Wide receiver probably has the biggest names, but God, it's a lot of boomer names.
Dude, this would have hit like crack 5 years ago, man. Holy fuck.
It's so funny seeing all these names next to each other because, yes, we have T. Higgins, who, we'll talk about him, but the Bengals want to bring him back. They are expected to franchise tag him. So tag and trade is not out of the question, but T. Higgins is the only one who is like truly in his prime and is like, we expect maybe elite production from. The rest of these guys, like Chris Godwin, is I think
put Chris Godwin closer to T. Higgins than the rest of this crew.
I was going to say that.
He's
Chris
closer
Godwin,
to T. Higgins than he is to Keenan Allen.
Yes, I would agree. So Chris Godwin is kind of the clear second best receiver in the class, the free agent class. But it also sounds like we don't really have much indication that the Bucs are going to try to move on from him either. Anything can happen, but he sounds like a guy they very much want to bring back. After that, Boomer Sooner, baby. Stephon Diggs, and I'm not talking Oklahoma, they're just boomers. Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins. Old heads. And then
once again,
Hollywood
most of them I believe
Darius
are around our age, but
no, they're old. They're all their ages start with 30. They're not
okay. Keenan Allen's 32. I was terrified I was going to look up Keenan Allen and he was going to be like 28, and I was just going to blow my brains out.
No, receivers, once their age starts with 3, it gets dicey, and all these guys are at that point. So I just like these guys, Pat, I just don't really fucking care where they end up. I guess that's maybe unfair to Diggs because he did have a really nice start to the year and he was fantasy relevant, but it's
yeah, he could. I think he's more likely to make an impact than Cooper or Keenan Allen or DeAndre Hopkins.
I just feel like his fantasy relevance to start the year was so not touchdown dependent, but like buoyed by the touchdowns, and now he has that on his resume where, you know,
the negative touchdown regression, bro.
Well, sure, but like more so, you have what was kind of an uninspiring overall track record for last season. On top of he just tore his knee up again, so it's like you can't just wipe the slate clean after that and be like, all right, yes, we're going to get exactly what we got last year. No, you're going to get an even watered down version of what we got last year, which was a step back from his prime.
With the Tank Dell injury and nobody really truly stepping up after Diggs' absence, I could really see him going back to Houston. As boring as it is to put all these guys right back where they were, I think him going to Houston makes the most sense for both parties.
I would agree. And then again, the non-boomer names are Marquise Brown and Darius Slayton. Let's run through the rest of these names, Pat, just so we can get to our little draft. Tight end, we've got Zach Ertz. I would be a little surprised if he went anywhere other than Washington just because he's so fucking old and he was such a good fit there. Like, there's no reason for him to go anywhere else. Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki, Tyler Conklin, and Juwan Johnson. On the offensive line, I love me some Juwan Johnson. I don't know about you. Tyler Conklin, too. Fantasy sleeper. Offensive line, we've got tackles, Ronnie Stanley, Cam Robinson, Joseph Noteboom. Guards and centers, we've got Trey Smith, Drew Dalman, Will Fries. I'd love me some Fries. Brandon Scherf, Ryan Kelly, and James Daniels. Pat writes, IDK how to evaluate linemen, but looks like a lot of options. Yes, I agree, and I want the Patriots to sign at least 3 of them. We also have
if the Raiders don't get one of those guys, we're heading to Vegas.
You, they're all ours. I want all of them.
I'm going to Vegas in August. I'm bringing the pitchforks. Me and the Proud Boys are bringing the pitchforks. Mark Davis, look out.
And then you mean the Stroud Boys. And then yes, we do talk about defense sometimes. We've got the edge defenders on the market are Khalil Mack, Josh Sweat, Matthew Judon, who that ended up being an awesome trade for the Patriots because he was just kind of trash. I was like, I would have liked more than a 3rd-round pick. Now I'm like, man, we're lucky we got anything better than a fucking 6th out of that guy because he is big washed. So the Falcons kind of fucked up with both him and Cousins. They're big guys on like both ends of the ball, just not good. DeMarcus Lawrence, Hassan Reddick, and Malcolm Kuntz.
God, I cannot believe Malcolm Kuntz was in the top 20 on PFF. The Raiders
actually
had another good draft pick.
Yeah.
And I hope they bring him back, but I think it'll be a case of another team paying him handsomely, which he deserves. But I had to put him just because I was flabbergasted that they had him ranked that high, but well deserved.
I want the Patriots to spend every dollar of their $120 million in cap space
on Joseph Noteboom.
Maybe. On the D-line, we've got Osa Odigizua and 100-year-old Calais Campbell. I imagine he just retires. I don't know.
He was good last year.
I don't know. I saw some Dolphins fans wanting him gone, and they were like, I don't know. But that was, I think, indicative of the Dolphins situation because they were like, we're not good as a team. Let's get something for this 38-year-old who could probably help a more contending team. So who knows if he hangs it up or not.
Like, you can actually joke about being old, but he's legitimately 40 years old. But I bet you he's signing a contract.
It's certainly possible. At linebacker, we've got my favorite free agent target, but he may just end up back in Philly. Zach Bond.
He will.
And then Dre Greenlaw, Shaq Barrett, Nick Bolton, and Bobby Wagner. Out of these names, I know Nick Bolton it would take hell or high water for him to leave Kansas City because they love him and he is just the core of their defense.
And Bobby Wagner is also 100 years old, but playing at a reasonably high level.
Another commander boomer, just like
I feel like he's back there as well.
He's
only 34. Jesus, that's not that old.
The Commanders' entire roster is just children, boomers, or Terry McLaurin, and that's all it is. At cornerback, we've got DJ Reed, Trevarius Ward, Rasul Douglas, Byron Murphy, Carlton Davis, Stephon Gilmore, and Asante Samuel Jr. You threw me off with Asante Samuel for a second for some reason because I was like,
and you know what's funny?
oh wait,
that's bizarre because when I make my lists, like the only time I actually acknowledge the junior that people put on their name is when they are a junior of someone that played.
Yeah,
I couldn't tell you a random baseball player who uses junior. Like not on
Jackie
my
Bradley Jr.
I do put the junior for him, I think, because it just sounds good. I don't know. I'm selective.
No, that's fair. And then at safety, Javon Holland, Talanoa Hufanga, Justin Reed, Harrison Smith, and Cameron Bynum. So that's your look at the free agents for this year.
Again.
See who your team ends up signing. Yeah, it's not bad. And now we will get into the best free agent fits for fantasy football. This again, Pat and I will go back and forth putting players in what we believe to be ideal fantasy football fits for them. I think we did this last year, but it's kind of melding together, both it being a realistic landing spot, but also an ideal fantasy fit.
Yeah, I'm trying to predict, but also, manifest a little, have some fun.
Yeah, but it's also not like, putting T. Higgins on the fucking, I don't know.
Jaguars. They have the money.
I guess, yeah. We're trying to keep realism as a part of it, is my point here. So, Pat, who the fuck has the first pick? Do you have any idea? We could flip a goddamn coin for it.
Do you want to give T. Higgins a landing spot, or?
Who did I put? Where did I put him? I kind of do, because I put it.
Take the first pick, because I would just put him back in Cincinnati because I'm lame.
Oh, fuck you.
Go ahead and take T. Higgins here.
No, I did think about it. So look, when thinking about T. Higgins landing spots, there were, I think, 3 kind of big fish that aren't the Bengals. I think mostly he has been mocked or talked about to the Panthers, the Patriots, and the Chargers. I think those have kind of been the 3 that have a good amount of cap space, need a receiver, all have the quarterback, we believe, and just need a guy like T. Higgins. But looking at the cap space, Pat, and factoring in that I have some level of concern about T. Higgins' ability to be a true wide receiver 1 on a team, I wanted to put him somewhere where it both made sense and where he could take a bit of a step forward because he's not playing with Jamar Chase, but he's still playing with somebody. And I'm picking the Washington Commanders because I think the Commanders, they have a lot of cap space, as we know. We've talked about them being sort of an ideal spot for Myles Garrett should a trade, arise. As of now, the Browns are claiming they don't want to trade him, but they have all the cap space in the world to accommodate Myles Garrett. I also think adding a guy like T. Higgins, who can play alongside Terry McLaurin, where it really is like a 1A, 1B situation. It gunned to my head if I had to predict who got more targets out of those 2 guys, I would have absolutely no clue. But that's better than playing with Jamar Chase, where, Chase is just the clear alpha in the room. And I'm able to put him with a quarterback that I have anointed on this pod many times that I think he's a top 5 guy in the league. He is... it's a situation where I was thinking of all the quarterbacks I could put him with, and it's like I have him obviously ranked higher than Drake May and Bryce Young, and at this point I've put him higher than Justin Herbert. So I think that situation is just so perfect for him in the sense that he also doesn't have to be the clear 1 that is getting just double teamed all the time. And it could still lead to maybe better fantasy production than he's had with the Cincinnati Bengals, because T. Higgins missed 5 games. Let's see what he had targets per game last year compared to Jamar Chase, because Jamar Chase had 175 in 17 games, so that is 10.2 targets per game. T. Higgins had 109 targets in 12 games, so 9 targets per game. So he's right behind Chase. I feel like I could see him either having the exact same as Terry McLaurin or more. And so I just really like the Washington fit for him, and I think it fits their timeline nicely. So I'm putting T. Higgins on the Washington Commanders.
That's interesting. I probably would have caved to the woke mob and put him on the Panthers, just because I think that would be, for at least for fantasy, would just absolutely maximize his value. But yeah, Washington, real life fantasy, that would just be hot. That would be, and he'd fit in with the Terry section of the age demographic too. Give a little more. Okay. I got to give somebody to the Raiders here. They've got the 3rd most cap space.
There it is.
I'll cut right to it. Najee Harris, come on down.
Wow.
This one feels like a realistic scenario, and one that at least I would like. It makes sense. You look at the Raiders the last few years, their last few head coaches, they've tried to run the ball, and you bring in Pete Carroll, who in Seattle, they ran the ball like fucking crazy all the time. The Raiders' offensive line is putrid, but they have that 6th pick. Say they don't go with a quarterback, you'd think a lineman would be very viable there, or if they trade down a little bit with, some of those targets there. You beef up the line a little bit, And you bring in a guy in Najee who, like we said, can handle the workload. The guy has been durable. The guy plays. The guy's always out there. He's a bit of a pass catcher. They just didn't really throw to him because they had Jalen Warren. But I just think it makes sense for a team that kind of you can't run it back with Alexander Madison and Sincere McCormick,
and
God forbid Zamir White
and Dylan Laube and whatever gross fucking running back.
You need an upgrade on that, and not like we said, Najee Harris is certainly an upgrade on that, a considerable one at that. And, could I see this being a slight overpay? Yeah, I could, just with their cap space and whatnot. But I think this just kind of makes sense in a situation where it does kind of seem like Najee's kind of heading somewhere else. At least that's the vibe I'm getting.
Yeah, so that threw a wrench in my draft plans, Pat, because I did have Najee Harris to a team that was not the Raiders. I had him to the Bears because I just think
I didn't really think of them as a team that
they need a back that is not DeAndre Swift.
That's what I mean. I viewed Swift kind of as a guy that they might be content with, but I don't think Roshan Johnson is much of a guy. So if anything, they're going to bring in a second.
Yeah. All right. So with my next pick, I will just go with Sam Darnold to the Rams. I think it's a possibility that I floated.
You sold me on that.
It's a possibility I floated to in the skit that I posted yesterday. It was kind of the punchline of it, but I do think it makes a lot of sense. This was a possibility we talked about, or a concept we talked about even before we knew Matthew Stafford was remotely going to be moved, because we were like, all right, if Sam Darnold's going to go, because we were talking about whether Minnesota was going to move on from him or not, and it was like, well, where could he go that he's going to have any kind of success like this? Because we don't trust him in a situation like the Raiders or the Jets, where it's not literally ideal. Darnold clearly needs kind of a nice soft offensive bed to lay in for him to be able to perform to his best capability. So I remember bringing up the Rams. I was like, the Rams are one of the only other systems where it would work. It's like the Rams and the Niners, right? Now that it's a possibility, I'm absolutely going to say Sam Darnold to the Rams, because I think him going to a system like that would keep him fantasy relevant. And the reason to me that this is, again, we're trying to make ideal fantasy spots. The reason I'm saying this is a more ideal spot than just staying with the Vikings is because he doesn't have J.J. McCarthy breathing down his neck in L.A. Yep. Maybe the Rams, draft a quarterback or do something, but
Stetson Bennett breathing into a breathalyzer instead.
Right. It won't be, even if they do draft a new quarterback or something, it won't be a guy they spent a first-round pick on, unless something insane happens. So I just think you go to a place with a very similar sort of system to LA, or system to Minnesota, excuse me.
With he's a disciple. Yeah.
Yeah, with a better offensive line, similar quality. I guess maybe not similar quality of weapons, but still a really elite wide receiver in Puka Nacua, and we know how they just get the most out of everybody else they have on that roster at all times. Anyway, I think Sam Darnold to the Rams is a way to maintain both Puka Nacua's fantasy viability as a wide receiver one and, very high draft pick that we expect him to be in fantasy next year, while also giving Sam Darnold a pretty clear path to a back-end QB1 season like what he just did in Minnesota. The lows will still be low because he's Sam Darnold and he's not immune to having his just shitty Sam Darnold I'm seeing ghost games, but I think this would mitigate it as much as any other landing spot, just like Minnesota would.
Yeah, that, like I said, when you brought that up earlier, you sold me on that one. I can get with that one. All right.
Ram Darnold, baby.
This one's lame. This is a return. Boo. Sorry. Yep. Boo. Yep. Boo. I see no reason for anyone involved for Chris Godwin to leave Tampa Bay. As fun as it would be, because like we said, outside of T. Higgins, he is the only other wide receiver that could probably go somewhere and make a big impact. But for Tampa, they've got something so good going on offense with how Baker, it wasn't a fluke. Baker had another really strong year under Duval. Here we go. Hit it. There we go.
Duval.
All right, I'm done.
And you saw that offense though. There were tons of targets to go around. Godwin was playing really, really well before that injury. And you saw them trying to shovel all his targets to Mike Evans and K. Dotton, but we're at a point during Evans. Evans is still producing 1,000 yards every year. He's still producing. He's still a red zone target. Chris Godwin is the number one wide receiver there, in terms of usage, in terms of production, and unless someone really comes and throws him the bank, I don't see any reason why he doesn't stick around.
Yeah, I agree. I would expect him to stick around. That was my initial thought as well, was to put Chris Godwin back to the Bucs. And maybe the fact that I expect that so strongly is a reason I shouldn't have hypothetically assigned him to a different team. But I did assign him to a different team, and if I was able to put Godwin on a team, I actually was going to go with the Texans because I think when you think of ideal landing spots, I think with the Buccaneers, not that he is going to take any kind of backseat next year to Jalen McMillan or anything like that, but with how Jalen McMillan came on at the end of the year, I'm like, let me get Chris Godwin to a place where he is playing with basically the same situation that he's been in with Tampa forever, playing alongside one really big alpha and not much else, just to play it safe. And that's what Houston is lined up to be. They've got Nico Collins, who effectively is Mike Evans. And with Tank Dell, we don't know what his future holds. He's not going to play probably at all next season. And assuming in this hypothetical that Stephon Diggs is gone, it's just a upgrade over Stephon Diggs. And I think it would be such an ideal wide receiver too for Houston. But yes, back to Tampa. Like, I don't think that's a bad placement for him at all. We saw he was on, maybe historic's too strong a word, but like, he was blowing his fantasy ADP out of the fucking water.
He was going to finish the year as a borderline top 5 wide receiver.
Yeah, until he snapped that ankle.
In a fucking meaningless game. Still mad about that, man. I was so fucking. I don't think I had any Chris Godwin stake last year, and even I was so fucking furious.
Yeah. So Bucks are still not a bad spot for him. All right, with my next ideal placement, Pat, I'm going to turn the Raiders into Pittsburgh West because I'm giving Justin Fields.
Oh, thank God.
It is.
I thought you were going with Raiders country. Let's go to jail.
No. I can't in good conscience involve Russell Wilson in anything that's ideal for fantasy. Like, he's fine, but like, no, that's not an ideal situation in any stretch. Justin Fields, I'm putting on the Raiders because Justin Fields' whole shtick at this point is that he's maybe not the best processor as far as quarterbacks go, but he can feed the ball to one target, and he can run. And so they're good, assuming they let him run, and they let him feed the ball to Brock Bowers, Pat. I think that's a pretty ideal situation for fantasy football.
He'll be Chip Kelly's little Marcus Mariota.
God, that's exactly.
A fucking throwback.
I mean,
we're old, man. We're dust.
I feel like people forget maybe how good Justin Fields was for DJ Moore, because he's just a quarterback that, I'm not even going to say for better or for worse, it's for worse in real life, but isn't necessarily great at moving beyond his first read, and Brock Bowers would presumably be his first read most of the time. So he could feed the number one on the team. After that, it gets dicey. But for fantasy purposes, the Raiders really only have one guy we give a fuck about in the pass game anyway. I don't care about Jacoby Myers. I'll never care about Jacoby Myers. I'm sorry. So Justin Fields going there, good for his own value and good for Brock Bowers' value in my eyes compared to what they've been rolling out, last season. So I'm going Justin Fields to the Raiders.
On Jacoby Myers, please.
Jacoby Myers is a very good receiver, but I just can't bring myself to ever get excited about him for fantasy, and I don't think I ever will.
Oh, fantasy, sure. All right. See, this is tough here because there's a couple really potentially big running back vacancies, but you just feel like there's nobody truly big enough to the point that they won't go into the draft. I'm talking about Denver and Dallas here.
Yep.
Both teams that we saw. Denver greatly exceeded expectations, and Dallas, could still very well be back in playoff contention this year with a few fixes. But God, I don't want to give either of them Aaron Jones. That feels icky. But who the fuck do I give Aaron Jones to? Fuck me. I didn't prepare as much as Bran did. I've got the list of names here and a list of teams that need people, but I didn't really, Yeah, fuck. I don't want to keep someone back. Oh, God. That sounded like something else, sorry.
It's a drum roll.
No, I meant my. Oh God. Oh.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, that's better. Come on.
Duval.
They've got a fuck ton of money.
The Jags?
The Jags have the number one cap space.
No, that's the Patriots. Don't you rob us of our title.
Were the Jags not ahead of them?
No, Patriots have $120 million in cap space.
I thought the Jags were pretty cheeked up.
I can't imagine the Jags have that much with what they're paying Trevor Lawrence. Jags
Maybe
are like 12th.
Oh really? Oh, you know what?
15th.
That number did probably change after Lawrence. I don't know why I thought they were like literally at the top of the list. Okay. I am gonna give Aaron Jones a landing spot here though, and you know what? Let's ring around the NFC North here. You can be a Chicago Bear.
Okay, I like that. I thought about doing that.
Because like you said, DeAndre Swift, I just think he's flat out just not nearly as good as everyone thought or wants him
Fuck
to be.
DeAndre Swift. I'm tired of him. He needs to go.
Well, exactly. You know, in Detroit, he never panned out, and then we saw Jahmyr Gibbs do what we wanted him to do a gazillion times better.
Yeah.
And then we saw him put up good numbers in Philly behind a great offense and the tush push, sorry, DeAndre. And then have his moments in Chicago here. But if they really want to keep moving forward with Caleb Williams, Roma Dunze will have a much bigger role here. You need somebody else. And I feel like, you know, flip a coin in general, just with age, I'd rather have Najee than Aaron Jones. But in terms of like right now production, Aaron Jones is probably the top running back out there. So let's go with that.
Ashton Genty to the Bears. No, I like that. After you picked Najee to the Raiders, I was considering doing Jones to the Bears just to give them somebody, because I do not at all believe DeAndre Swift is going to be their starting running back to start next season. Like, just not even, no part of me believes that.
And like I said earlier, Roshan Johnson has done nothing to eat into it and be the 1A, 1 to his 1B. Like, it's just not going to be it, unfortunately.
Right. All right, with my next fit here, Pat. So here's the thing that's interesting about Aaron Jones to the Bears, right? Not only it is ring around the NFC North, not only is he going to a division rival, he's going to a team that is coached by a guy that has watched him play for years now. You know, Ben Johnson with the Lions, saw Aaron Jones with the Packers, and then with the Vikings. I am also going to go to a different situation where a team has been able to watch a running back for years before bringing him on to their own team. And that is Nick Chubb to the Cincinnati Bengals. I think.
Oh, see, that's the least threatening thing I've heard today.
And that's fair. And that's fair.
Oh, I wouldn't even care about.
I think Nick Chubb. Well, I think you should care a little, because I do think the reason I'm doing this is because of the touchdown equity here, and just the fact that I think the Bengals probably would want anybody, you know, just to bolster that running back room more than what Zach fucking Moss did last year, because he was. Herbert. Yeah, Zach Moss was terrible. Khalil Herbert didn't play after he was acquired at the trade deadline. I think Nick Chubb, I feel like the Bengals, even acknowledging, you know, the fact that he had this horrible injury and probably isn't going to be himself anymore, maybe have been impressed by just him over the years. They have a respect for him, and I could see them bringing him in just as a compliment to Chase Brown and allowing him to take some of those early downs at times. I think it's just an ideal spot for him to get the most juice out of the rest of his career, because it puts him, more important than anything, it puts him on a really good high-scoring offense. Like, I looked back at my notes from fantasy before last season about trying to just decipher some of these ambiguous backfields, and the Bengals were one of them, because we knew they were going to be in scoring position all the time. We just didn't know who was going to actually get the rock in those moments. They tried to force it to Moss early on, realized that Chase Brown was just better, and then obviously Moss got hurt as well, but they realized that Chase Brown was better. I feel like in an ideal world, they will want at least one other sort of competent back. And I don't know how much Nick Chubb has left in the tank, but I could see a division rival that watched him run over them for years, you know, giving him a shot, especially with how cheap he's probably going to be at this stage of his career. Because the Bengals have to throw all this money at Jamar Chase. They're going to try to keep T. Higgins. They're going to try to keep Trey Hendrickson. I could see them going this cheap for a compliment, because it's probably going to be pretty damn close to the minimum for Nick Chubb at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we're doing like a more real life draft in terms of best fits, I'd agree there. But Yeah, that like I said, as a Chase Brown fanboy, that did not move me much in terms of being frightened.
I view Nick Chubb to the Bengals the same way you viewed Zeke to the Cowboys last year when you were projecting them to keep Tony Pollard. I think that's almost in exactly the same situation.
All right.
I would say aged out, but like goal line specialist sort of thing.
Okay. Let me stick with the Bengals here. I feel like we've got to give one tight end a home here. What might be the only fantasy relevant one here. I'm going to put Mike Gesicki on the Chargers. I feel like he's been on every team in the world. And we saw last year, Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman, they wanted, like, Will Dissly was a legitimate, like, solid starting tight end for a few weeks. Like, I started him a couple times, and he was really good. And you tried to make Stone Smart happen, so sorry to the Stone Smart.
Stone Smart did happen. He had 5 catches for like 30 yards every week. It was awesome.
Sorry to the Stone Smart truthers, to absolutely nobody. But I think in that offense, they're screaming for more of a competent tight end. I feel like they haven't had one since Antonio Gates, for fuck's sake. Hunter Henry was decent, but yeah, I think Gesicki.
Darius Green, anybody?
I remember him too. Out of any of these tight ends here, I feel like he's the most likely to make an impact. We saw him have some huge weeks in Cincinnati, granted, when T. Higgins was out. But again, you're looking at a team that needs targets, needs weapons. And, I think Gesicki will be more of a complementary, and that would put him in a position to be a low-end tight end 1, high-end tight end 2 streamer.
I like that fit. I don't like the Stone Smarter ratio, but I like that fit. I think that all makes a lot of sense. They really don't have any pass-catching options reliable beyond Lad McConkey. Josh Palmer did not a whole lot. Quentin Johnston was a touchdown merchant, but still showed a lot of the things that have plagued him, particularly not being able to catch the fucking ball, just seemed to pop up at the worst times throughout the year. Better than being completely useless like he was his rookie year, but still not a guy that I think they really want as a real, like, let's move our offense through, McConkey and Johnston. I think adding Gesicki would be a nice little piece there. All right, with my last fit, I am going to keep a guy in a spot, and it is J.K. Dobbins with the Chargers.
Yeah. Yep.
I just think I was so happy to see him be able to bounce back last year, and like I mentioned, a couple minutes ago, like, it's hard to envision a spot that he goes to that they would commit to him as much as the Chargers did this year. Granted, with the injury popping up and Gus Edwards just not being that good, I do wonder if, even if they do bring Dobbins back, if they bring in a different back to kind of complement him. Gus Edwards, I do know for a fact, is under contract for next year. But if they maybe want to, keep Dobbins around because he is electric and a plus to their run game, but give him maybe more of a break with somebody who is even better than Gus Edwards, that would dampen his value. But I just don't see a world where J.K. Dobbins goes to a place and is a workhorse. So I'm going to keep him in the place that I saw use him really well last year and do their best to kind of keep him healthy. And then when he was healthy, he was basically an RB1 the entire time. I think with just how committed the Chargers are to making the run game work, to improving that line, with them having Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator who has that familiarity with Dobbins, I don't see any other team treating him as well as the Chargers did. So I'm going to keep him there.
All right, and I'll round us out with another boring stay in where you are. I mentioned it earlier. Let's keep Stephon Diggs in Houston here. I think with Tank Dell being out all year and nobody truly stepping up in Diggs' absence, and like you said, a lot of his, fantasy scoring wasn't necessarily on volume, but the volume will probably be there unless I'm like having a stroke. Like, Dalton Schultz, I'm like, I couldn't think of their tight end. He particularly didn't do much. So there's a lot of work to be had there. And you even saw like Diggs had a couple like jet sweep touchdowns. Like they were trying to get him involved. And he's not the Stephon Diggs of old, but I think you're talking about a really
he's just
sturdy
a Stephon Diggs old.
Yeah. He's a really sturdy veteran wide receiver too, familiar with the team, to go behind Nico Collins, who's emerging as one of the best wide receivers in the game.
God, yeah. Is there? It's hard to feel like there's a safer, volume fantasy pick next year than Nico Collins with what's happened to this Texans.
Oh, dude,
offense.
for real?
Like Tank Dell, it was a concern coming into this past year that it was like, oh, is that actually CJ's favorite target? Like, even though he's a smaller guy, but now it's like, yeah, it's Nico. There's no question that it's fucking Nico.
Yeah, he's already been one of my favorites here in the early parts of the offseason.
Yeah. So that'll do it for our best free agent fits for fantasy football. I've got T. Higgins to the Commanders, Sam Darnold to the Rams, Justin Fields to the Raiders, Nick Chubb to the Bengals, and J.K. Dobbins to the Chargers. Pat has Najee Harris to the Raiders, Chris Godwin to the Bucks, Aaron Jones to the Bears, Mike Gesicki to the Chargers, and Stephon Diggs to the Texans. That'll round us out for this week. Next week, Pat, I guess we'll have combine reactions if anything interesting pops up from now until...
If anyone looks good in their underwear, yeah.
If anyone's looking good in them underwears, if they're pushing some weight, if they're running in a straight line real fast, we'll hear about it and we'll tell you guys about it. So,
I'm in my underwear right now.
For now, that'll do it for this episode of Brand Coverage. Guys, thank you for tuning in. For Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we will see you guys next time.
I'm in my underwear. Bye-bye.
And for those of you sitting in the chat still, we will answer some of your questions. First, we have 11 super chats to get through.
Wow.
That's a lot.
First, this is from not Bucko. A good side boob image. I'm going back off cam.
I like it. From Bucko, he donated £5 and said, "Hi guys, I've seen reports."
Who, to me? On the screen. I didn't need him.
He said, "Hi guys, I've seen reports about Debo wanting to be wide receiver 1, even if it means a move away from the 49ers. Would you take him at your respective team?" Fuck no.
My
Absolutely
respective team,
not.
Yes. My respective team, yes.
I don't want
They have the money and the targets available. I understand why but I think the Raiders specifically are one of the better fits on the board for him.
I don't want the head case that he is if he was throwing sort of a bitch fit about targets on the fucking 49ers. If he's going to be like that on the 49ers, I understand this year was a year from hell, so like morale wasn't great, but like to bring him onto a team that is actively rebuilding, no thanks. Like I'll prefer to look a different direction for Drake May to find somebody. Mahmood with $4.99 said, "How is Shane still a GM? Also, Stafford of the Giants is a Band-Aid applied to a third-degree burn." Yeah, good question. I think Joe Shane has made like some good moves, but I don't know. I wouldn't have been surprised if they moved on from him. I wasn't like they're incredibly stupid for keeping him on. Just maybe blinded by the good draft they just had. Any GM that puts together a nice job like that, you got to give some credit. So I think that's why he's still a GM. And then Stafford of the Giants being a Band-Aid to a third-degree burn. Yes, it would depend on if they could find a quarterback to like try to mold behind him. I think it's still not a most ideal or logical fit to me.
And you see, like you're right, Mahmoud, that it's a Band-Aid to a third-degree burn. It's better than doing nothing to it. Mm-hmm. Which is potentially what they could end up doing here. Again, having that third pick was just like the worst spot possible for them to miss out. Unless one of these top two teams loves Abdul Carter, which could very well be the case. And then we're talking about a Giants team with Ward or Shador. But yeah, I think Shane kept his job because he had a good draft this year, and maybe ownership believes he can carry that out and be the guy to somehow lead them into their rebuild. Still, most of their problems still fall on Dave Gettleman, which is just insane how terrible that guy was. So, yeah.
Edward with $2 said postseason follow-up
wait, I have a
video
good bandage story first.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was in the hospital yesterday because my surgical wound was bleeding so badly that it went through 4 bandages, my shirt, and a sheet. So apparently I needed that bandage on the third-degree burn. Whatever bandage Mahmoud was talking about, can you send that my way, please?
Pat's fucking leaking over there. God damn.
God, no kidding.
Edward with $2 said postseason follow-up video as every wide receiver won, referencing the fact that I just did a postseason follow-up long-form skit video as role-playing as every quarterback.
Yeah, I like that one.
I probably won't do one as every wide receiver one, mainly because so many of the points that I made in the quarterback one were very overarching and team-based. I don't think there's enough material to do it as receivers, so I probably will not do that. But the long-form skits will still pop up here and there for sure. I may do another preseason one as wide receivers, or maybe just quarterbacks again. We'll see. But that one's not in the cards particularly. Gwendolyn with $4.99 said, "Do you think the Jets wasted a draft pick on Jordan Travis? I'm hearing the Jets will draft a quarterback." I think it's hard to say you wasted a draft pick on a quarterback that was the 171st overall pick.
I was about to say, what round was he taken?
Fifth round.
I would say there's never a waste in that round. Even if your quarterback is like fucking Tom Brady, you should still be taking those late round darts because you never know what they could turn into. So no.
Yeah, and Jordan Travis was a really good college quarterback. Had a very devastating knee injury that I actually don't know what his status is. I don't know if he's like practicing or like actively doing things yet. But he was never expected to play at all last year. Like even, not just because they have Rodgers, but because of health. So I could still see this being a draft pick that works out if he can recover the right way, because let's say they do draft a quarterback, like there's no guarantee that like Travis couldn't beat him out. The only reason he was a 5th round pick is because of the injury. So I'm not willing to call that a wasted draft pick. And again, as that late of a pick, those are the kind of darts you want to see your team taking when they need a quarterback to try to hit on them. Odin with $20. Thank you, man. He said, hope Odin. You guys are well, especially Pat's recovery. But per position, what stat do you weigh the most when it comes to fantasy drafts? Position? Okay.
Quarterbacks, rushing yards, maybe even rushing touchdowns. If you can get a guy that is not only getting you rushing yards, like Lamar has been historically known to, not necessarily have as many rushing touchdowns as you'd think. So, like, if you get a guy like Hurts who's racking up the yards and getting in the end zone, man, that's great.
Yep, I would agree. I think I would prioritize yards a little bit, because touchdowns, if you're not tush push Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen, it's a little bit. They can be, not sticky year to year like any touchdown.
I understand that.
Like touchdowns in general are not going to be our answer for these other positions. I know for a fact.
One of them it will be.
Tight ends, I guess, is probably fair. But yeah, I think I would go rushing yards for quarterback. At running back, carries. Like it's going to be volume based.
It's going to, and honestly, that's the answer to. I joked about the tight end being touchdowns. It's the answer to all three is volume, because like. At least if you're getting the ball 20 times a game in the backfield or getting 10 targets a game, your chances of something good happening are just way better. I would much rather always go with the guy who has like 8 for 70 than the guy who has 2 for 100 and a touchdown. Right. Like give me that first option any day of the week.
Yeah, and I think wide receiver targets most important, and tight end targets also most important. The important thing I want to note here too is that when you say what stat do you weigh the most, we're talking about like projecting these stats, because you can't just look at, how many carries did this guy get last year, how many targets did this guy get last year, and let's rank them out that way, because those things can change and will change so much year to year, like especially at the running back position. Just because a guy got 15 to 20 carries per game last year does not mean he's going to get that this year, but it's more about trying to look at the situations and be like, how many carries do I think this guy is going to get? That's going to be the guy I'm prioritizing.
But that's the thing though, like in season, it's like it's a great way to kind of maybe scoop someone up. You look and see like, so-and-so had 7 carries this week. He never had more than 2. Like that could be something. And maybe 100%. It was nothing. Maybe it was a one-off, but like, I feel like that's the best indicator. I feel like we don't see a lot of guys go from like 0 to starting unless you're Audric Estime, and then you go right back to 0, apparently.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not always a perfect science, but yeah. That kind of thing is what you want to be looking for the most. And then kickers don't suck. Patrick Ward just donated $4.99. No message. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick.
Appreciate you.
You are the best Patrick in this stream at the moment.
Bucko with 5 pounds, I think, said, in your guys' opinion, is the fantasy community getting closer to seeing quarterbacks as first-round picks with the performances of people like Allen and Lamar? I do think we're getting closer.
Yes.
I still don't think it's really going to happen in one QB leagues. Most leagues at least. I don't know. What do you think?
I still think there's enough top tier talent at running back and wide receiver, and quarterback is still deep enough where you don't have to do it. But I've always been, kind of an advocate for taking a later quarterback and load up everywhere else. But the way these top tier quarterbacks are playing is you cannot excuse it. Like you cannot look past that. And while I don't think I would take a guy like Allen or Lamar in the first round this year, if you do, I wouldn't say like, you're crazy, you could get a quarterback much later. That's how good a couple of these guys have been. the past few years, to the point where, like, I don't think I would personally change my philosophy that much, but, like, I'm not going to wag my finger at it like some old man. Like,
yeah, I don't think it's ever going to become the kind of consensus among the fantasy community. I think you'll see it happen a little bit more maybe in just the casual leagues, people liking quarterbacks because that's just what happens in those leagues. They know
points are points
better. Points are points. But I don't think the, like, sharp, fantasy community is going to come around to this idea just because of economics, man. It's positional scarcity. You're only starting one of these guys. You got to start 2 receivers, running backs, or 3 of one of those positions with the flex spot. It just runs out faster.
I don't think you would catch me taking a quarterback earlier than, I don't even want to say definitely not earlier than the 3rd round, but even the 3rd. I'm taken aback a little bit.
I've looked back at, like, in our league, Pat, my history of drafting quarterbacks, and it's basically any time I draft one in, like, the 4th round or sooner, it never works out.
Patrick Mahomes.
My season has never played out well if I spend a early-ish pick on a quarterback. Every year that I've just waited, it's gone much better. So maybe that's just anecdotal, but, like, that's been my experience. So Omega Recon Gaming with $9.99 said, I don't know if you've heard, but the Ravens had press conferences today with the GM and head coach, 2 separate ones. They were interesting. They, of course, addressed Tucker and Andrews. Yeah, I saw they're talking about just the Tucker investigations ongoing. Obviously, he's a fucking goon. I hope he gets cut if he's guilty of this, which too many accusations for my liking. So yeah, fuck that guy. And Andrews, yeah, I saw they had kind of glowing reviews on Mark Andrews. So yeah, just the Ravens kind of telling us where they're at right now. Pretty standard protocol, I thought.
Like I said earlier, like, I like Mark Andrews way better than a guy like Travis Kelce, and I think he was so bad and invisible at the beginning of the year, and then had such a heinous drop in the play. He was, like, really good, not really good, but, like, he was good. Yeah. For a good portion of the year. I just think his beginning of the year was that bad where it makes his year-long stats not necessarily look reflective, but I think he's more likely to be that guy than whatever the fuck that was the first handful of weeks.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Sounds like they want to bring him back. Bucko with 10 pounds said, with the best of rugby league in the Super League and the NRL going to the Allegiant Stadium to to play a round of fixtures, is it something you might watch with the NFL season finished? Respectfully, no.
Football season's over? Son, that just means 5 days until Atlanta. It's a NASCAR joke.
Fucking shit. No, Look, I've spent enough rotations around this earth that I've got my routine of what sports are relevant when kind of down. I'm locking into college basketball right now because I'm not one of those heathens that only watches in March. I like to watch the lead up as well. So it's college basketball season for me. I'm not really looking to add any other sports. I'm sure it's entertaining. Rugby's a hilarious sport in the best way. Just football, but without pads. So, like, I get it, but I won't be watching.
Yeah, I like to watch, at least try to have some level of watching college basketball throughout the year, but these next few weeks are the best weeks of the fucking year. I like them better than the tournament most of the time. So
conference lock into that. Are awesome too.
And I'm a huge NASCAR fan. They just started last week. I love golf. Golf just started. It's like, yeah, I don't know what would ever possess me to watch any of these.
Yeah. You could just watch the Tush Push compilation anyway. Alex with 199 said Traquan Smith. That's it. That's the super chat. Respect. Traquan fucking Smith,
W super chat, Alex.
W super chat. And then Scott with $2 Canadian said, what is the constant Duval cry about?
The what?
Duval.
You'll have to Google it. Okay. Any questions in the chat now that we've gotten through all the super chats? We can answer a couple of you guys' questions. Apologies that took so long, but we'll answer a few of you guys if you've got them.
I'm not apologized. Thanks for all the super chats.
That is very true. Real quick, Omega donated
I gotta feed my 3 daughters.
Said, who would you make the Dream Ravens wide receiver 3? No Aguilar. Cooper Kupp. How about that? Sound good?
3. Yeah.
Cooper Kupp, wide receiver 3, behind.
Duvernay.
Behind Bateman and Flowers at this stage of his career, I wouldn't be really surprised if that was the role he took on. Let's
James
see.
Prochet.
The best beans in sports. Oh, no, wrong thing. Said, are the Pats taking Tet McMillan? I mean, my very plugged-in sources have told me that maybe. The Patriots have just wide open, like they could do whatever the fuck. We need so much that like I'd really be okay with anything. Honestly,
and that's the thing, and they're in such a good position that they need everything but quarterback. Is that because like I was about to say the Raiders are in a similar situation, but those motherfuckers need a quarterback badly. So the Patriots are in an enviable spot here where it's like, if they took Ted McMillan, it may not be their biggest need, but it would be like, yeah, he's going to make that team way better.
Yep. JB Bass said, "Hey, Bran, I was wondering how annoyed or not you were with the Chiefs' hate, whether they're overhated or not, especially after the AFC Championship this year. You must not be a regular listener of the pod if you think I was annoyed by Chiefs hate." No, I was not annoyed by it. I think there's obviously people with anything that go overboard with stuff, but like I think hating a team that was going for a three-peat is kind of just standard protocol in sports when you are a neutral fan. Like, it's just how it goes. Like, no, I'm not going to like them.
Doesn't help that Taylor Swift is in the fold, who, you know, is obviously that does not necessarily impact how I feel about the Chiefs. It does for a lot of people, unfortunately.
Yeah. You know, I don't hate them, like, truthfully, like, personally. I'm not, like, going to see Patrick Mahomes or Travis Kelce be like, fuck those guys. I hate those pieces of shit. It's just I'm going to hate them as far as I possibly can for just rooting against them to win. That's all it is.
I was trying to squeeze a Pat Mahomes senior drunk driving joke in there, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't think of one.
Don't do that. Let's see here. We'll do a couple more. Hunter said, "Bro, I'm a Browns fan. I just want the draft to start." I feel like that's Browns fans for the last 30 years.
And yeah, so usually they're never glad that it started when it's over a lot of the time too.
Yeah. Alex said, "Who's winning, Mavs Lakers tonight?" I forgot that it's Luka versus his old team tonight. I didn't.
And no AD as well. So
I didn't click
10 o'clock. What time is it right now? 9:17. Oh, perfect.
Awesome.
This will be an enjoyable evening.
Yep. Might have to clap that one on a little bit. Abraham said, "Do you think the Niners will be good next season?" Yes. We've talked about it a couple times this year. This year was an anomaly because of injury and fucking tragedies and everything under the sun happened to the Niners. They still have one of the most talented overall rosters. Yeah, pneumonia in the NFL. So yeah, I think they will absolutely be good next season. They will probably be a borderline Super Bowl contender again next year. Let's do two more here. What do we want to do?
I'm admittedly not looking at chat as I'm currently looking into the dark hole of, I don't even know. I'm not even medicated either. I'm just tired.
One of them could be Omega Recon with another $1.99. Thank you for all the donations, man. Much appreciated. He said Chris Godwin or Devontae Adams to the Ravens. I mean, yeah, either one would be lit. That'd be huge.
Because like Zay Flowers is really good, but like again, one of these guys would be like a real alpha number one wide receiver to go with another really good young wide receiver. They're another team like the Chiefs, always mentioned anytime there's a good wide receiver available, and for good reason.
Should the 49ers re-sign Brock Purdy? Yes, he's going to be overpaid. It is what it is. You don't move off of a quarterback that has shown that he can succeed within whatever system you have created. If you rank quarterbacks, 1 through 20, it's not going to be proportional what he's paid as far as how good I actually think he is, but he does what they need him to do so well that they can't get rid of him. Because if they get rid of him and move on to some other schmuck and that guy sucks, then that is just malpractice by the front office when Brock Purdy has gotten you to a Super Bowl.
Trey Lance redemption tour.
And then what do you think about Joe Milton maybe being traded? Down for that, obviously. If that one game against Bills backups can get us literally any shred of draft capital, all the way the fuck in on that. So yes, absolutely. All right. That'll do it, guys, for this episode of Brand Coverage. Thank you for tuning in, and we will be back here once again next week, 7:30 Eastern Time, reacting to whatever may happen over in the NFL.
I won't just be a stock face that day, hopefully.
Pat is expecting to be recovered well enough that he could be vertical, so that's always good news. Guys, thank you for tuning in once again. For Pat Gustafson, I am Brandon Carney, and we'll see you guys next time.